Hello, my name is Natalia Duteau, and this is my digital story assignment. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story as a reader and writer, and we're going to reflect a little bit about how it has influenced me as a teacher and as a writer. Before I went to school, I honestly don't have any memories of anyone reading me bedtime stories. However, I have lots of memories of my mom and my dad telling me lots of stories, bedtime stories, all kinds of amazing tales that I really enjoyed. Additionally, I do remember my mom teaching me the sounds of the letters, which was great for my literacy. During family gatherings, my family would always get together and tell all kinds of anecdotes, things that had happened to them, things that had happened to their friends. We always spoke a lot. We come from a very, very expressive Hispanic family. At my house, we didn't really have a lot of books that I can remember before school, but we did have a lot of magazines, and they tended to be like farandura magazines, like famous people, and fashion magazines. My mom was a beauty queen, so we had just a lot of fashion and beauty magazines in our home. I didn't really go to nursery school. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she pretty much raised me and my sister. And we did go to school, but a little bit later on. My mom didn't really allow us to watch much TV, but whenever she had to cook or do something, study, I think she was studying before I started school. She was getting her master's in some type of engineering, I think. The only TV we were allowed to watch was like musical shows, so stuff with little songs and music. Although I wasn't really read stories because my parents were both engineers, they were more math-oriented people. They were really, really focused on education. So they did make an active effort to teach me to read. They taught me all the sounds of the letters. They helped me blend the sounds. And I have a lot of memories of learning to read with my parents. Honestly, I don't really remember ever engaging in writing before school. I think I only started writing once I started to go to school, but not really at home. I never saw anyone writing at all around me. I don't really recall doing anything as a reader or a writer at this time in my life. So right before I started formal school, kindergarten, I moved to Colombia, which is my birth country. We moved back, and I started going to school at a school that was very, very old school and rigid. So my first experience learning to read and write was basically traumatic. It was all about having beautiful calligraphy, and that was really hard for me. So I would write my assignments, and my teacher would tear my paper up and make me redo the whole thing. I remember in first grade, Miss Carviesel, I wrote a whole biology report. I spent a lot of time in it, and she just ripped my paper and made me do everything again. I spent hours and hours just copying the letters over and over again. They had a specific font that we had to do, and it was just horrible. I sucked at writing. I still have to this day horrible handwriting, and there was no joy in writing at all. So writing basically had to be perfect, no mistakes. I never got to write any books. I never got to do any creative writing where you do like a little picture and write your story. It was more just, here's an A, copy it. Here's a B, copy it. And trying to make your page look very, very perfect and neat. Reading, on the other hand, was amazing. I remember my teachers reading to me in the carpet a lot. One of the first books I remember being read was James and the Giant Peach. They read it to me in English. I had a teacher from Australia. I didn't really know much English at that time, but she was so vibrant when she was telling the story that I could really understand her, even though I didn't know English. In my early childhood education at Columbia, I also had to memorize a lot of poems like Doña Caracola y Don Caracol and recite them to my class for fluency. We did that a lot, and I really, really loved doing that. So the only writing I ever saw any of my teachers or parents do was my teachers when they wrote on the board, but they never really wrote stories or things like that. They just wrote like the assignments and the information that I had to copy down. My parents never wrote anything either. So I was pretty separated from writing. My new school was not very rigid at all. It was very laid back, and I began to explore a lot of new things. However, my school was all in English all of a sudden. I had learned a little bit of English, but not much. All of a sudden, everything was in English, no Spanish whatsoever. And in 5th grade, my teacher decided that I should write a book. I couldn't really write at this time in English, so she paired me with a girl from Spain, and we got to write our book together. That's when my teacher did allow my first translanguaging moment. She paired me with a Spanish student, and she allowed us to work on this book together. I still have this book because I was so proud of it. The spelling in it is terrible. I could not spell in English for the life of me, but it was called The Future Sweaters, and it was about some sweaters that you would put on and travel to the future. And it was my first writing experience. As I started going through the grades, my English, like I said, was very low, so they put me in a group called Learning Center, which was for students who have learning disabilities, because I was struggling in all my classes because I could not read in English, so I was not able to do the assignments. During this whole time, I was translanguaging, speaking Spanglish and English. My oral proficiency was a lot better. So during this time, I would speak with my friends in Spanish mostly. I was friends with mostly Spanish speakers, but I would throw some English words in there. My English proficiency in orally was a lot better, so I could do that. In English class, I had to speak only in English though, and during the Spanish classes, I was to speak only in Spanish. Because my English was so poor in terms of writing, I really wanted to take a higher level, kind of like an AP class in literature, because I loved books. I was falling in love with the reading, but I wasn't allowed to take it because my teachers recommended that I spend more time in the lower level English classes, learning grammar and sentence structure and spelling. So I was kept away from reading work. On the other hand, in Spanish, I was allowed to take higher level Spanish classes where I got to read so much amazing books, so much great literature that blew my mind away. I was in heaven, basically. On top of that, my teacher was actually an author, and he would write books. And he was so passionate about reading and writing. His name was Miguel Vitagliano, and I still remember that he told me, the whole class actually, one day, that he was a prostitute because he had to work at our school to be able to pay his bills, because all he ever cared about was writing, and you couldn't make enough money being an author. But he just transmitted his passion for reading towards me, and I began writing a lot of papers in school that I really enjoyed writing. I was finally allowed to take a little bit of a higher level English class in which we were reading Shakespeare, and we had to perform the plays and memorize some of the parts and read them aloud in class. I really enjoyed this. It was super fun. And I also got to write my own poems and read them to our class as well. So now I finally began to be allowed to write my own work at school, creative as well as academic. And I also began writing personally at my house in my journals. I have written maybe like 15 journals because that's when I began, and I've continued to write ever since until I had children and I didn't have time to write anymore. But I would just write and write and write and write and write nonstop. It was my absolute number one coping mechanism for my adolescent, hypersensitive life. I wrote everything, all my thoughts, the things that happened to me, my dreams, everything. I also was falling madly in love with reading. I would read all the works that my school gave me. Nothing was enough. I just wanted to read more and more and more. It was a romance. Finally, my teacher for English, the one that we read Shakespeare in her class in, she recommended me to take the higher level English class, even though my spelling still was terrible and I had some issues with my writing. But she believed in me because of my love and passion for reading and writing. And at the end of my senior year, after 2 years of taking this course, I took an external evaluation and I got almost a perfect score. And so thanks to those 2 years in higher level English class and my Spanish class with the author teacher, my writing was very good. I went to college and had no issues with writing. So I'm very thankful for that experience. My friends and I don't really read or talk about any books or blogs together. We pretty much just like hanging out and having fun and letting our kids play together. But I do need that literacy connection. So I am part of a book club where we read books every month and get together and talk about them and have wine. Another way is that I connect with other bilingual families that are raising their kids bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate through my Instagram, The Bilingual Mommy, where I share about raising my kids in a bilingual, multicultural family. And I get to talk about the books we read with other people on Instagram and share about that. At home, we have all the books, basically, for my kids in Spanish mostly. We also have some in English. I only read to them in Spanish and speak to them in Spanish. My husband only reads and speaks to them in English. We love reading. We read every day. We read fiction books. We read non-fiction books. And we just are readers. Before the COVID pandemic, I used to take my girls to the library every Friday and then to the playground that was right across from it. We don't do that anymore because now the libraries are closed. Well, I don't know here in Georgia, but they are in Nashville. And I used to always get books for myself for the book club. Since we read a book a month, I would just get it at the library so I don't have to spend money purchasing a new book all the time. Mostly I speak about my writing to my amazing husband, John, because it is pretty private. I used to write all the time. I had a lot of journals, and I've shared those with him. Nowadays, I mostly just write letters to God, and it's more like a personal prayer with him. So I write in my journals to God. I do dream about writing a book one day, especially a children's book. My daughter with me where babies came from. I read maybe like 5 or 6 different books on the topic, and none of them I felt completely satisfied with. So that's when I began dreaming about writing my own child's book to explain this topic. I have also written a lot of poems that I love to write in personal, but I don't want to publish those. That's just personal for myself. My reading and writing is sustained in both languages through my basic life with my multilingual family. I read to my children in Spanish. I read books in Spanish and in English. In school, I usually write in English, but on my Instagram, I write both in Spanish and in English. And I teach my kids reading and writing in Spanish. What to improve as a biliterate person is my grammar in both English and Spanish, but especially in Spanish, because I am a little bit bad at it. So I would love to improve with that. In my adult life, my kids are queens of translanguaging, especially the two middle girls. The oldest one is pretty good at staying in Spanish, but the middle two are 100% translanguaging. They speak in Spanglish to my mom, who doesn't speak any English. Personally, me, I translanguage with my sister and with some of my friends that I grew up with, who live in Miami. But with everybody else, I usually stick to one language or the other. Based on this reflection, the greater connections that I can make are that the most important thing for literacy is to allow children to fall in love with reading and writing before trying to focus as much on phonics and decoding. This reflection has made me envision the kind of literacy I want to create for my students. First of all, I want to create an environment that's rich in text and literacy and stories, whether that is oral stories like I had in my early childhood or written stories that I read to them. And I want to give them the opportunity for them to express themselves in writing, even if their writing is not perfect yet. In conclusion, based on this reflection, the experience I want to provide in my classroom is one that is fun and positive, joyful and authentic, where kids can really relate to literacy. I wanted my classroom to be filled with stories, both written and oral. And I want students to be able to discover literacy as a way to express themselves more deeply and discover the world. Finally, I would like to avoid literacy as neatness, where if the child doesn't write neatly, I'm going to break their page. And also avoid an obsession with spelling. So if a child really loves to read and write, I would allow them to really dig deeper into that instead of focusing only on their spelling or their decoding. Just let them progress as their interest goes by. Thank you for everything and see you soon.